Hey, we are two Star Wars nerds, and today we're going to be giving, I guess, our review, kind of our thoughts. Overall opinions of Book 2 of the Thrawn trilogy, Dark Force Rising. So let's get into it. So, trying to talk about the book as a whole here. Obviously we have like the book club where we go through in sections of the book. Makes it a little easier to like kind of catalog our thoughts.
Right.
For Heir to the Empire, we just did one talking about it all, but it proved to be a little bit difficult.
It was hard to remember everything.
Yeah, and maybe it's just like the completionist in us. We want to think about things a little bit more. But overall, how do you, like, really, really high level before we get into the weeds, how do you like the book? Like, if you're going to be like, don't like it, okay, it was good, great, awesome.
I loved it.
Loved it. Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you like it more than Heir to the Empire, or which one do you like more? I'm just curious.
I don't know if I really like one more than the other. I feel like they continue so well, and it feels like one story to me. Like, even, I think a lot of the Dark Force Rising, when I'm thinking about Dark Force Rising, I'm like, oh yeah, that happened. I'm like, no, that was Heir to the Empire. Like, just how it flows. I seem to be mixing them up really badly. So I apologize in advance if I do that in this video, but I'll try to stick to just this. But they just mesh. It just seems like one big book to me so far. That's really just building upon each other. I feel like I remember there's bigger events and like things that I remember from Heir to the Empire.
Yeah,
like I remember them in the field or in the jungle, and then when the AT-ATs and with Mara, and that's Heir to the Empire, right? Okay, so I like remember that really well. Where this, I don't remember as many of the big things, but I don't necessarily think that's bad. I feel like a lot in this one, they did a lot more like character building.
That's what I was gonna say too.
Even world building a little bit, or maybe not even world, but like even like ship building, and like they just even the way he describes the ships that they're on, and everything. It just seemed like it was building out and building upon Heir to the Empire to prepare. It's like a really beautiful bridge that's just preparing you for the next one, I felt like. So I didn't like one more than the other as of right now. They feel like one to me.
Nice.
Can't separate them
in
my mind.
And I go back and forth because I keep saying I like this better than Heir to the Empire, but then I'm like, no, but I really like Heir to the Empire. But I agree. I think Heir to the Empire, for like, if you watched episodes 4, 5, and 6, and then you read Heir to the Empire, like, bang, like, that's like, it's good.
Yeah.
I don't think it's flawless, but I think it's like really, really good. And there's a lot of, in my opinion, high octane action. Like, it just keeps you going.
Right.
Where I do feel like this slows down a little bit, and it becomes more, the flash is kind of worn off, and it's more of like chess. Like, some things are being positioned,
right,
and you're feeling like, okay, like I feel some movement taking place,
right,
which is cool. And I think you're right, because for world building, you get to see a lot more of the Nogri home planet.
Right.
And so, like, in Heir to the Empire, you're like, man, these Nogri are just ruthless.
Right.
And then you get to see more of their home planet with, like,
their story, their
matriarch, and, like, then you realize what the Empire did to them and enslaved them. And so, like, you get to see, and sorry if there's probably a little bit of spoilers, trying to not have too many spoilers. But then, and I just learned this fairly recently, like, all the ship stuff, I guess Timothy Zahn was given, like, those West End game RPG books that I have. He was given a bunch of those, like, before writing. So, like, a lot of the stuff he's, like, pulling into, like, deep existing game lore.
That's super cool.
That's why when you read it, you're like, man, like, it's so alive. But then he takes characters deeper.
Yes.
Although, I'm like, Lando, it seems like his sole motivation is ships.
He wants to get back to his...
It's always the ships. He wants the Millennium Falcon, or he wants his like diggers. He wants to get back to his mining operation, or he katana fleet, right? He's always motivated by some kind of ship. But anyway, I think overall it's really interesting, especially because like Joruus, however you say it, he's introduced so heavily in Heir to the Empire. And
then they kind of back off him, and then it makes you wonder a lot.
Yeah.
Like, what's this guy up to? Like, where like, when he kind of disappears. Like,
And I think that's interesting to introduce him as such a potent threat, and then he kind of, like, takes a back roll, and he's, like, doing things, and you see him every now and then.
Yeah, he pops back up.
And then, it's just super interesting. I'm trying to keep it spoiler-free. And I think, you know, a big thing is, like we talked about in the book club video, the relationship between Luke and Mara, how that's changing, and even her, well, I mean, really, I think what's interesting, because I do think this is like the Empire Strikes Back of the trilogy. That's really how it feels. But you look at how Luke relates to Mara, and even Joruus, how he's essentially he's thinking of his dad, thinking of Darth Vader, and he's like, I think I can redeem this guy,
right?
Even though he's absolutely insane,
right?
Absolutely insane. But who would you say your favorite character to follow? Because there's kind of a lot of different storylines going on.
My favorite character,
or character to follow, or in the book.
I always got most excited when it was Luke. Yeah.
Nice.
Like, I loved everyone's story, but when I saw, like, when the chapter was starting with Luke, I was like, yes. Because, like, what is he... Because I felt like a lot... He did it in all of them, but, like, you'd have one chapter on Luke, and then it would kind of drop off, and then it'd go to Han, and you're like, this is great, but what's going on? So I felt like there's, like, a cliffhanger the entire time for all the characters. And so Luke's one of my all-time favorite characters, so I was always concerned or wondering, like, what's Luke doing? Yeah.
And that is actually a good point, because the way Timothy Zahn writes, he has a formula, and it works.
Yep.
It's a little more evident in Heir to the Empire, I feel, but essentially he writes like a chapter devoted to one section of the story, because there's so much going on at once.
Yeah.
So he's like, okay, Luke's doing this, and then Thrawn's doing this, and then
Han and Lando are doing this.
So there's
Mara's doing this.
There's this movement, and then what's really interesting is then when he starts to like split chapters. So then he's showing, and then sometimes he like carries it through two.
Right.
So the movement here is a little better, because Heir to the Empire, you are like like every chapter,
right.
You're waiting.
But he's having to set up and build a lot, so it makes sense.
Yeah. He still uses sardonically.
I felt like he used it less.
Yes, but it's still that he loves that word.
And that's fine.
And twisting lips, right?
Yeah, something like that.
I still don't know what that means, but
I don't either.
But yeah, I think overall, I really enjoy the book. I think that people should
read it.
Should read this, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is interesting. Because there's a lot of really interesting parts of the book, but there's one thing where it talks about how, we talked about it in the book club, how Vader loses his right hand after losses on, or basically in the Battle of Yavin and stuff with the Death Star, that his hand gets cut off. And it's just interesting to be like, man, this poor guy just keeps getting his hand cut off, as like a punishment.
Right.
At first, I think we talked about it in the video. I was like, is it a continuity error? Like, that later was kind of like changed, but I don't think so. I think it's, just like you're saying, just that petty punishment
right.
over and over. But, Any final thoughts you have?
I'm very excited for the next one.
Yeah.
That last command.
Yeah. Yeah, overall, stunning book. Really, really good. We were lucky enough to find a hardcover of the whole trilogy, which is nice. Dust jacket's in really good condition. So next we're on to The Last Command, which is great. I think overall, if you haven't read it, buy it and read it, or even get the audiobook and listen to it. I listened to the audiobook. It's fantastic. Really, really good.
I like to hold the book.
Yeah, I do too, but we just had the one copy for a while, so I was like, it's hard to find time at the same time.
Right.
Or separate times to read. But anyway, yeah, with that, I think overall, if you want to get deeper into the weeds of the book, go through the book club video, because we go over it quite in quite depth.
Yep.
But yeah, overall for me, it's great. Great middle part of a trilogy. But yeah, with that, we are two Star Wars nerds, and may the Force be with you always.